The Great Gatsby has been with us pretty much as long as cinema. I mean, the versions date back to the 1920s. There is a silent version from the 1920s, which that no longer exists, but the trailer for it does, which I showed you just earlier on. Well, an awful lot of silent cinema no longer exists. The prints have disappeared or been destroyed or disintegrated.
So I'll never have the chance to catch up then.
No, you won't. You won't be able to make that your one silent film. But we are going to tweet now the trailer to it. It's only a minute long, but it gives you a sort of flavour of the film. And it's lovely because it's got this thing about, enjoy the most extraordinary thrill ride of your life, which sort of tells you that even from the earliest versions they were talking in those terms.
Can I just say on that point?
Yeah.
In that trailer, from when is it,
1926, yeah.
1926, it's got a scene right from the end.
I know.
And now that has to be a spoiler.
That idea that putting scenes from the end of films in trailers is a new thing clearly isn't. It was happening way back then. So then there's a 1949 version with Alan Ladd. There's most famously so far the 1974 version starring Robert Redford, and now of course the Baz Luhrmann version, which is very much of its times and is shot in 3D. Last year at the Sundance London Film Festival, Robert Redford was here, and we talked to him about the Jack Clayton version of The Great Gatsby from 1974. So before we move to the Baz Luhrmann, here is a clip first of Redford as Gatsby in the 1970s, and then our brief conversation with Redford from last year talking about Gatsby.
How do you do, old sport? I'm Gatsby.
Nick Carraway. It's a pleasure.
You live in the cottage across the lawn. I tried to buy it once.
I've been trying to find you, but...
I'm afraid I'm not a very good host.
Truth of the matter is, I don't much like parties.
I thought we should get acquainted since we're neighbors. I hope you're enjoying yourself.
Yes. Thank you.
In my opinion, the greatest novel ever written is The Great Gatsby. You starred, obviously, in the very famous adaptation from the 1970s. You know the film is being remade at the moment by Baz Luhrmann. Do you have any feelings or any particular memories about the successes or failures of that 1970s version of Gatsby, which became so epochal? I mean, we even had a pop group at number one called the Rubettes who dressed like Gatsby because that movie was such a big deal.
I can't believe you brought the Rubettes into
I'm not going to meet Robert Redford and not bring up the Rubettes. Have you heard of the Rubettes?
No.
Of course he hasn't heard of the Rubettes. I'm so ashamed.
But that adaptation of Gatsby, which was very faithful to the novel, how do you feel about that film now? Do you think it stood the test of time?
I don't. I certainly respect doing it again. I mean, that's fine. When I think back on it, I think I was looking for something that maybe wasn't possible at the time.
Which
was to get inside the story of the book a little bit. Now, what was interesting about the book is that they kept Daisy and Gatsby at a distance from one another. And I think that was part of the power of the book. But I thought, well, if a film is just totally loyal to the book, then why make a film? Because the book was so great, mainly because of the descriptions and so on. But I felt that we might take a step further and get inside and have an intimate moment between he and Daisy that would reveal the same thing, but it would be more, there would be more texture to it. But no, the idea was to stay strictly to the book. So for me, the experience was really about costumes, and it was about the locations, and it was about set design and so forth, which I thought was exquisite, and the words of Fitzgerald. I had hoped for something that, now that I look back on it, probably wasn't a good idea.
So bearing that in mind, what would be your advice for Baz Luhrmann
doing it in 3D?
I would never give any advice to a fellow director. I think it's his choice, and he can do whatever he wants.
And are you wowed by the prospect of stereoscopy? Have you gone with the 3D revolution?
No, not entirely. No, not entirely. I saw, when I was a kid, my brother and I, we were 15, I think. We rented tuxedos and snuck into the first, in Hollywood, just for the fun of it. We wanted to see if we could sneak in to the premiere of the first 3D movie. It was called Bwana Devil.
Yeah. A lion in your lap, a lover in your arms. That's the tagline.
How typical of you to try and trump our guest.
I wasn't
there.
trumping. I was just that was a very famous tagline.
And I love the way when you said, "Are you wowed by the prospect of stereoscopy?" It sounded as though you were inviting him onto the couch for a medical examination. That's what and that's clearly the way he took it.
Okay, so
that's Robert Redford on the show last year.
That was Redford from last year, talking about the 1974 version. Now, the new version, the Baz Luhrmann version, just opened the Cannes Film Festival a day or so ago. Is now opened in the UK, opened in America a week ago, and actually did very well at the box office. Took more money than they expected it to, although significantly less money in 3D than they had expected to. Here's a clip from the new version of The Great Gatsby.
I thought I might see you here.
Hello.
I remembered you live next door.
It's like an amusement park.
Shall we?
Did you get an invitation?
People aren't invited to Gatsby's.
Well, I was. Seems I'm the only one. Who is this Gatsby?
He was a German spy during the war.
Teddy Barton, Nick Carraway.
A German spy?
No. He's the Kaiser's assassin.
I heard he killed a man once.
It's true. Kills for fun, free of charge. He's certainly richer than God.
You don't really believe he killed a man, do you?
Well, let's go find him and you can ask him yourself.
So the question then is whether what they managed to do is to find Gatsby. Now, the interesting thing about Luhrmann's introduction to Gatsby was watching the 1974 version, the Robert Redford version, which he saw when he was growing up in Australia. He then says that having finished Moulin Rouge, straight off the back of Moulin Rouge, he took a train journey across, I think it's the Trans-Siberian Express, and he remembered being on the Trans-Siberian Express, drinking wine, watching the landscape flying by, and listening, not reading, but listening to the audiobook of The Great Gatsby on headphones. And in a way, that tells you everything you need to know about how it is that we've arrived at the Baz Luhrmann version. I mean, it is clearly something that has been concocted by somebody slightly tipsy, moving at a great speed, listening to something on their headphones and going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. That's how we get it. Because everything in the new Great Gatsby is turned up to 11 stupid and then some. The question, therefore, about whether or not that's an appropriate thing to do with Gatsby is the key question, but that is what it's like. So there's a line in it which is from the book, obviously, when Nick says, "I've only ever been drunk twice." And you think, well, strange, because the film itself looks like it's roaring drunk. And in fact, there is this addition, which is that you've been given a sort of wraparound that he is telling the story. Nick, the narrator, is telling the story, telling it to a doctor as a recovering alcoholic. This is an invention of the film, that he is now sort of pouring out his soul because he's had such a traumatic, relationship with the Gatsby affair that he is now drying out, and he is told by the doctor, write it down. So you get this device whereby you actually see somebody writing stuff down. All the stuff that's there in the book, which is, of course, a slim book, is there, but everything cranked right up. For example, the sequences in which they have to drive from out in their mansions out in West Egg into New York via the Valley of Ashes. I mean, it's like outtakes from Speed Racer. The whole idea is that they're driving cars slightly recklessly, but in this, they are driving them like they're in the Fast and the Furious. There's a quote from Baz Luhrmann. He said, "We wanted to feel exactly how it would feel to be going to the most amazing nightclub in the world and driving the fastest you have ever driven." So it's anachronistically fast. It almost looks like a video game, and there's endless swooping 3D shots which come, out and in, and sort of very, very Moulin Rouge. There's a crucial line in the book in which the whole thing is to do with Gatsby, who is basically somebody who is attempting to take on the mantle of somebody who was born to wealth, but he isn't. He's arriviste, and that's the whole problem. That's the whole centre of the book. And he's fallen in love with Daisy because Daisy embodies for him what he believes is his dream of his life as somebody who would have come from old money but doesn't. And there's a moment when, which is very famous, they're trying to figure out what it is about Daisy's voice. And Nick says, well, her voice is full of, and Gatsby says, it's full of money. And the film is full of money. I mean, it's like it raining from the sky. Gatsby's castle, it is a castle rather than a house. The thing about, your house is lit up, it looks like the World Fair. It looks like Disneyland. I mean, it's just like some great big Gothic mansion. Now, Luhrmann will say that because one of the themes of the original book is to do with, with the recklessness of finance and stock markets and the way everything is building towards some inevitable crash. And of course, when the project began, that was what they were saying. They're saying, we're doing Gatsby now because it's really a story about the lead up, the run up to, to a great financial collapse. And therefore, and it is. I mean, it's this, there's champagne corks popping absolutely everywhere and eye popping stuff going on. And the movie looks like it costs a lot of money. Plus, It has, very, very modern soundtrack about which there's been much said, and some people have taken against that. Although to me, that modern soundtrack is no different to Ken Russell, for example, saying when he was doing The Devils, we're going to make Loudun look like this. It doesn't look like an old city. It looks like a modern city, because to the people who were living in Loudun at the time, it would have looked modern. It wouldn't have looked old and mossy. It would have actually looked like something designed by Derek Jarman. So everything is cranked up, everything is turned up to 11. Every single passage in the book, which even mentions that somebody had a party or did a skip or had a drink, turns into a 3-minute sequence of partying and revelling. And actually what most of the response seems to have been, that that's the level at which the film works, that it gets the kind of, the craziness, the wildness, the modernness, the excess, the sense of sort of overbearing excess, but that what it doesn't get is anything else. And I have to say that I don't agree with that. I think that there is more Gatsby in this than people are giving it credit for two things. Firstly, it is clearly the work of somebody who has a certain degree of reverence for the text and has actually tried to find something in the text, has gone looking for something, a particular element. They've taken a particular angle on it and they have gone looking for it. It turns out that element is what happens if we stick our head right in the candy floss of the party and see whether we can actually see out to the lawns, to the strange mysticism, to the really weird evocation of it. So there is a reverence for the text. In fact, at times they put the text on the screen, whether it's Nick typing away or whether it's the text literally floating off screen, because there are certain moments, like, for example, the final lines of the book, which it's almost like, what can you do other than read and show them? The Clayton version, when it started out, there was a script by Truman Capote, which they then threw out because Coppola said, no, we need to get back to the book. And it's very, very reverential. And what Robert Redford was talking about there was, well, if you're going to do that, why not just read the book? And of course, there's been a very famous stage production of Gatsby of people, reading the book, reading the book out loud. This sounds like somebody shouting the book at you. But even though that's the case, it still works, and it works on this level. The comparison with Moulin Rouge, which is the comparison that people are making tonally, which makes sense, actually has less. It doesn't work as well as the comparison with Romeo and Juliet. Everyone says the thing about Shakespeare is open to infinite interpretation, and that's what makes it so great. Romeo and Juliet is a version of Shakespeare. And throughout the history of cinema, you see, from Kurosawa's Throne of Blood to Polanski's Macbeth, from Forbidden Planet to Derek Jarman's The Tempest, from West Side Story to Abel Ferrara's China Girl. These are all versions of Shakespeare. And it seems to me that what you have in the Baz Luhrmann Gatsby is not dissimilar to what you got, for example, in the Richard Loncraine Richard III, which sort of gave it a modern thing and put tanks in it and set it all in Battersea Passage. Yes, it's not the Shakespeare text, or it's not all of the Shakespeare text, but it is a part of the Shakespeare text, and it is a version, and it is a reflected fragment of it. For me, I love the novel, and I love the novel so much that in a way I went into this thinking, if I more than anybody am going to be outraged by having somebody shout the book at me because it's such a great book. But actually what I thought was, you've taken this and you've done it's not the Great Gatsby, it's a Great Gatsby. And when you look at the Clayton version, which was attempting really to be definitive, and is for my generation, it is the version, because it's the version that you grew up on and then was soaked in pop culture, that Rubettes thing. I'm not saying that completely flippantly. I remember going to see it at the Classic Hendon and then buying the Rubettes records, and the two things were tied right together. People, 14, 15-year-olds will go and see this version, and then they will read the book. And there's so much that isn't in this film. But it doesn't matter, because the film is taking one aspect of it, which, what would happen if you looked at it with everything turned up to 11 stupid, if everybody shouted everything, if every car drive was a car chase, if people getting knocked down by cars, they're flying through the air, if T.J. Ecclesburg's, face became more than just the eyes of God. It's like a dance remix, but that is not without validity. And I think I'd happily watch it again. I found it quite exhausting, and I didn't find at the end that it's the version that I like the best. But I thought it was a version made by somebody who had looked for something in there and found a fragmentary part of it that they wanted to focus on, and focused on it, and did it. And, yes, did everything cranked up. This is what a supercharged drunk, this is what a Great Gatsby looks like if you listen to it as an audio book whilst travelling very fast across Siberia with a glass of wine in your hand, having just made Moulin Rouge. And you know what? Good for it.